Thank you, Kirti. Good morning to all of you. It's heartwarming to see such a large number of followers of agriculture and agricultural finance in the field. We all realize that eventually the food that comes to our plate, we owe a lot to the farming community. It is in that sense, I think, we look at agricultural finance as a subset of overall improving the agricultural ecosystem. When we look at agriculture, we are looking at not just the small and marginal farmers, all those who work very hard to produce things, but also we look at a huge raw material base for organized industry of several types, food processing industry in several different locations, and also a large export base that actually this sector supports. In fact, during the recent pandemic, we all realized that the rural areas and agriculture actually had the capacity to contribute much more. And in fact, they did. Whatever positive information that came through in the initial 6 months when we were affected by the pandemic, they typically came from the farming community and rural areas, despite the problems that they have faced. If we look at the Indian agriculture, the recent past has been one of rapid development, especially in diversification into subsectors and even within the crop sector towards a market-oriented production system. The commercialization and market orientation are very good auguries for the farming system and also for the economy as a whole. We have other fundamental problems of the agricultural sector which are gradually getting improved. The low productivity, the low profitability, also the issues relating to several widely distributed, very tiny farms getting tinier by every passing day. How to make these farms viable, how to make these farms sustainable is a challenge that we continue to face. And also the natural factors such as the climatic and weather conditions, the plenty or the paucity of rain and also the water availability to continue to carry out our crops and also support the subsectors. This is one of the things that keeps impacting us. A number of schemes from the government and also policy formulations by policy establishments like the Reserve Bank have tried to address many of these problems. Problem being large, number of people affected being in a few millions, not a few million, many millions. And also the kind of vagary that we see across the country, they do not easily lend for solutions that will run across the country. We require customized solutions for different crops, cropping systems, different types of agroclimatic zones, and also for the local preferences as to what they would crop and then they would make and sell and consume. Given this, the way in which agriculture is developing towards markets is a welcome development. So here, when we look at the connect between agricultural finance and agriculture, India started off its work in recognizing the need for finance to support agriculture long back. I think in 1954 or so, we had the first committee. We did the rural credit survey under the chairmanship of Dr. Gorewala, and which brought out several features that are necessary for us to support agriculture in a big way with finance. The State Bank of India creation was a direct fallout of, I should not say fallout, direct impact of that committee's report. And we have had incremental, changes that have come through from time to time. Overall, when we look today, the finance seems to have been adequately, finance requirements have been adequately met. Later on, I will make a presentation on what is the state of agricultural finance and where we are. I won't go into details of that. But one of the major issues that agricultural finance relies on or finance relies on any sector, whether it is agriculture, industry, services, whatever kind, is whether the borrower has a reasonable business proposition, whether the business is one, profitable, number two, whether it is sustainable, and a combination of these two, whether they produce enough cash for the loans being repaid. If this kind of a situation does not exist in a basic enterprise at a tiny firm or a very large industry, banks would be very hard put to give loans, because the loans come out of depositors' money, which has to be returned with some amount of interest. So the issue is agriculture profitable? Is it viable? Does it produce incomes? We could have no better person to talk to us about the connect between agriculture and agricultural finance than Dr. Ashok Dalwai. He precisely looked into these issues as chair of the committee that went into doubling of farmers' incomes. And in a monumental, kind of work, which produced 14 volumes, I keep telling him every time I interact with him about this. I think it captured the entire landscape of agriculture, all its subsectors, entirety of the diverse things that happen around the country, looking at pre-production, production, harvest, processing, post-processing markets, quite a number of things that have been suggested there. They have been incrementally taken up by the government and also by the banking system for some changes. So Dr. Dalwai and his team actually went into the profitability issues in agriculture and what kind of ecosystem changes should come. They also quantified what is the kind of financial support and in what form, what kind of loans are required, what kind of equity funding might be required, and what might be required in the form of grants and public sector interventions in agriculture. Dr. Dalwai is an ideal amalgam of administrative experience, technical expertise, and sector knowledge. And we hope to hear from him about what is it that one should do to make agricultural finance work for farming community, so that the farmer work for the rest of us. They put food in our plate, they clothe us, and they ensure that all of us. And when everyone else is enjoying the benefits of development, how farmers can also access the benefits of development, and what is the role of agricultural finance in this. So, in fact, what Dr. Dalwai is about to talk is about the macro developments and policy reforms that are related to agricultural finance. That is a nominal topic, but I would expect that he would go beyond that to be able to give rich insights to all of us. So let me now move over to Dr. Ashok Dalwai. It's your turn, Dr. Dalwai.
Good afternoon, Dr. Narasimhan Srinivasan. Thank you so much for your kind words. You yourself are an expert in this domain of agriculture-related finances, apart from other financing. Let me also thank Radhika, the Executive Director of Access Assist, for inviting me to be with you all, a platform that richly invites experience and expertise from a cross-section within the country and outside the country. I'm aware that we have policymakers, experts in the domain of finances, academics and researchers, NGOs, and more importantly, those who are committed to farmers and farming. Thank you very much for giving me this unique opportunity of sharing a few thoughts of mine on agriculture and agriculture finance. We are all aware that we need to ensure that growth of agriculture happens in a much more healthy manner. Alongside the growth of agriculture, like any other economic sector, what we need to ensure is the income increase of the farmers. The experience of the last 70 years in India shows that growth of agriculture may not necessarily yield growth of income of the farmers. Income of the farmers is important because incomes or purchasing power is integral to the welfare of the society. Welfare can come from the incomes that farmers generate themselves and supplemented by the welfare kitty of the government. Thirdly, an important aspect that all of us must appreciate is the need for equitability or egalitarian growth. Many a time, the statistics show a very optimistic picture. But then statistics also hide a lot of things. When we analyze, interpret them, we realize that there could be large sections of the society who are being left out. Hence, we can't just rely on the macro data, but we should go into the micro data and analyze. Let's therefore look at what's happening in the agriculture sector. And let us begin with the hypothesis that growth in agricultural finances will result in higher growth of agriculture, higher growth of farmers' income. So that is the hypothesis, and that's where I think all of us are sharing a common mind, and we shall take that forward. If you look at the current situation, what we see is that over the last 15 or 17 years, there has been a positive change, both in terms of volumes of credit offered to the agriculture sector, as also the distributive justice. In 2004-05, Government of India adopted what is called a doubling in agriculture credit for the sector. Between 2004-05 and 2007-08, that particular period of 3 years saw a CAGR of 35%. So there was an impressive paradigm shift. And since 2007-08, there has been continuous growth in a positive manner. And we are realizing a compound annual growth rate of around 22%, which is very healthy. Now, notwithstanding this particular impressive growth, if you look at the next level of detailing, we find that even today, the access to institutional credit is still less than 50%. It is around 46 to 47%. What it means is that a majority of the farmers in our country continue to depend on informal channels and money lenders. Informal channels include the friends, relatives, or known people within the village system, and around 16 to 17% depend on money lenders. And as you know, once we avail of money lenders' benefits, then the interest rates are highly usurious, and therefore agriculture becomes non-sustainable. So one of the important interventions that is required is to increase the access of the farming community to the institutional credit. The second dimension that we must remember, that even in respect of the institutional credit, not everything is a hunky-dory situation. The 2012-13 situation assessment survey showed us that the average size of the loan is around rupees 47,000. More than 52% of the farmers are shown as outstanding loanees. When we have now these two kind of situations, the interpretation is that the amount of loan being offered to the farmers is not adequate. One is offering a loan. Second one, is it adequate? Unless it is adequate and proportionate to the investments required, the agriculture cannot become profitable. Second one is, when the outstanding loans are very high, then the notion of non-performing assets come in. And when NPA comes in, then naturally the civil rating, the credit rating will actually bar out the farmers from accessing institutional credit in the successive year, in the succeeding year. That means it's not a sustainable situation. So we need to keep this particular thing in mind. Now, the other thing that we must look at is that, yes, I was telling you the volume of credit has been growing. For example, in 2007-8, we lent around rupees 2.78 lakh crore to the farmers as institutional credit. And 2007-8 is also a very important year for us, for the agriculture sector, because that's the year when the interest subvention began. That means the loans were offered to the farmers at a concessional rate of 7% as against the market rate of 9 to 10%. So that was a very good development. Now, what was around rupees 2.54 lakh crore in 2007-8 grew to around rupees 8 lakh crore by 2014-15. And thereafter, there has been a very respectable growth. And today, 2020-21, the targeted volume of credit is rupees 15 lakh crore, which is very good. But then, what does the next level show us? While this volume of credit has been growing, and since I was talking about equitability, egalitarianism, let's look at what's happening in terms of the size of land holdings and the regions of our country. If you look at the size of the holdings, what we find is of the total institutional credit that is availed of by the farming community, it is the larger farmers or the medium scale farmers who are able to benefit better than the marginal farmers. As you know, small and marginal farmers account for 86%, and marginal farmers alone, that means who own 1 hectare or less than 1 hectare, they are the majority, and they account for 65% of all the agriculture households in our country. Interestingly and sadly, only 15% of the institutional credit actually is availed of by the marginal farmers. That means the majority, actually around 79%, goes to the large farmers and the balance to the mid-scale farmers. So in terms of land holding, as Mr. Srinivasan was rightly saying, what we need to ensure is whether all size farmers, marginal, sub-marginal, small, medium scale and large scale farmers are accessing or not. So there is a lacuna. The second one is, what about in terms of regional egalitarianism? We find that if you compare the 5 regions of our country, North, South, West, East, Northeast, Central India, you will find that the institutional credit is heavily loaded in favor of South India. And if you further compare the institutional credit offered region-wise vis-a-vis the gross cropped area, you will find that situation gets more sordid. Let me take the example of North versus South. I'm not including Western India, Central India, Northeast and East in that. I'm just looking at North India and South India. North India, which accounts for 20% of the gross cropped area, avails of around 22% of the total volume of credit. And South India, which accounts for around 18%, that is lesser area than North India in terms of gross cropped area, avails of 30% of the institutional credit. So it is 22% in North India, 30% in South India. Now in Northeast, it is very small, around 1.5%. Eastern India, also small. This is not to say that South India is arrogating to itself all that is being offered. No. What it only shows is we need to increase the access of institutional credit in North India, in Eastern India, Central India, Northeastern India. It's not that we want to cut somebody to benefit somebody. No, that's not the positive way of developing. The story is that it also suggests the situation of cropping patterns. Because after all, the institutional credit that the farmers avail of is linked to what is called the crop requirement. That means technically the committee at the district level and the state level determine what is the scale of finance for each crop, and that also determines. So here, if South India is availing more, it means that they have adopted high value agriculture in terms of horticulture, plantations, animal husbandry, dairy, fishery, apart from, of course, having greater access to banking infrastructure, maybe much more discipline in terms of repayments, compared to North India, where it is dominated by monocroppings, paddy, wheat systems, for example. So that in terms of region and in terms of farmers, what we should appreciate is that there is a lot of scope to improve the situation. The third aspect that I should bring to your notice is the number of accounts. Since the government launched in 2015 the Jan Dhan account, there has been greater coverage of the farmers as also others under the banking system. Thanks to the unique identity in terms of Aadhaar given to everybody in the country, and thanks to the penetration of the mobile sets, both basic and smartphones, the Jan Dhan account campaign of Government of India made a huge success. So based on the platform of JAM, Jan Dhan account, Aadhaar and mobile sets, we have been able to reach out to a larger number of people and open accounts. The importance of this particular thing is that we have moved a little away from brick and mortar kind of a banking system to a digital banking system. In case of small loans, marginal loans, not just for small and marginal farmers, but also landless agriculture labor, etc. This non-brick and mortar infrastructure is a great help because it reduces the cost of transaction and it is much more efficient in terms of delivery. And this particular experience or success has been an account of India's huge success with promoting what is called self-help groups. Since 1990s, early 1990s, Government of India, state governments, and supported by a large number of NGOs have promoted women mobilization, microcredit, and self-help group, particularly in states like Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, has been a huge success, including Odisha, of course. And we must, of course, thank Bangladesh Grameen experience of Professor Yunus, who has been one of your very illustrious speakers at this event, I read, that we were able to replicate that particular experience in India and show that women can borrow and they can also be good repayers. So that will show the way forward to all of us. Now, what further should we do within the volume of credit enhancement and reach out? Now, what we should be looking at is how is this volume of credit being utilized? Now, as per the guidelines normally, the institutional credit, which is offered at concessional rate of interest, is categorized as short-term loan and long-term loan. And on average, 2/3 goes to a short-term loan, that is the crop loan, and 1/3 goes to the long-term investment loan. Now, both are extremely important for us because there is a direct correlation between the growth of agriculture sector and the growth of the investment. The elasticity of agricultural output is very high vis-a-vis the finances. For every 1 unit of increase in agriculture credit, there is a growth in agriculture by a factor of 0.29. You cannot find this elasticity in other sectors like industry or services. So the financial institutions would do well to remember that there is merit in investing in agriculture. Yes, there are challenges, there are risks associated with that. How do we negotiate those risks and make farmers greater absorbents of the credit from institutions is what is challenging and what is exciting. And that's where I think a platform like this should be deciding on the nature of products, nature of delivery, nature of infrastructure, and of course, the changes in the agriculture policies and reforms, and the ability of the farmers to adopt diverse agriculture system. Now, coming to this particular point, the crop loan per se, we have got the public sector undertakings, the banks, we have got the regional rural banks and the cooperative structure. Over the last 50 years since the nationalization of the banks in 1969 by Government of India, the volume of credit offered by public sector undertakings has been increasing. Today, commercial banks account for 75% of the total loan offered to the farmers, which is a very good sign. That only shows that there has been decentralization of the commercial banks into the rural and semi-urban areas. Around 12% comes from regional rural banks and 13% comes from cooperative banks. Since cooperative banks are large in number, but are offering only 13%, it only goes to show that we need to strengthen cooperative structure in this country. That is another subject that we should be looking at. How do you strengthen cooperative structure? How do you make them more efficient by making them to adopt digital technology? How do you bring in more discipline in their management? How do you get greater transparency within the system? The reason I'm telling is that cooperative structure is meant not only to offer institutional credit, but is also meant to provide other support systems to the agriculture. For example, warehousing facilities, to serve as custom hiring centers, to provide agriculture inputs like seeds, etc. That it can become a single window system. And if we are able to make them more efficient, transparent deliverers of the agriculture credit, then the other components of agriculture also run on that platform and make agriculture much more robust. That's the point I'm trying to make. Nothing against the commercial banks. The next issue related to this is that if we want the farmers to pick up greater amount of credit, because I told you that there is what is called elasticity of output vis-a-vis the agriculture finances, and if we are targeting doubling of farmers' income, if we are targeting to increase the welfare of the farmers in this country, we should be pumping in more and more money into the agriculture system. And if we want that to happen, the only way forward is to diversify agriculture production system. As long as we focus on green revolution crops like paddy and wheat, we will not be able to increase the investment in agriculture. Apart from the fact that monocropping has actually compromised the biodiversity of this country, it has also created problems of compromise in soil environment, degraded soils, depleted water table, soil toxicity, and compromise of microorganism life. We therefore need to shift from this monocropping system to diversified agriculture. When I talk of diversified agriculture, I mean not just within the cropping system, but also within the overall agricultural subsectoral system. Today, if you look at the figures, the major growth is happening in the fishery world. More than 20% growth rate is possible in the fishery and aquaculture sector. And India, with its 8,400 kilometers of coastline, large number of riverine systems, large number of water bodies in terms of lakes and ponds, has huge scope for both inland and marine fisheries. And that's where we should be making our investments. Second, most important in terms of growth potential is dairy sector, dairy and meat sector. They also are clocking a very impressive growth rate of 7 to 9%. And then comes horticulture, which is clocking a growth rate of around 6%. Then comes our cereals, which is clocking a poor growth rate of 1.6 to 2%. It is not to say that cereals are not important. They are important. It also shows that cereals have grown very well Now it is time for us to harvest the low-hanging fruits that that are available in horticulture, in dairy, meat, milk, aquaculture, and fishery sectors. So my appeal to you is that if we want to increase the volume of credit, which has got a direct bearing on the growth rate of agriculture and the farmer's income, then let us focus on diversifying the agriculture system. So Government of India's, as also the state government's policies and reforms today are all set at diversifying agriculture. If we are able to increase or better the scale of finances, in a way, unfortunately, in our country, the scale of finances are also not properly set. We are going by more of non-financial considerations in working out the scales of finance. We need a bit more of technical expertise and much more of secular and neutral way of determining the scales of finance for every agroclimatic zones and ensuring that it is linked to the crops grown by the farmers. Many a time we see that because the farmers do not have access to the consumption loans, which they are always in need of, they tend to divert the production loan taken for other purposes. They may take rupees 3 lakh showing that they're growing sugarcane, but they actually may be growing something else, and they divert a part of that money for their consumption loans. Today, with digital technology available, it is possible for us to track and trace and ensure that the money borrowed is used for the purpose it has been utilized. This is not to put a blame on the farmers, but it only goes to show what kind of anomaly exists at the ground level and how we need to help these poor farmers to actually generate enough income so that they don't have to become liars. Our system is pushing them into this kind of a system which is not healthy in terms of ethics. The second related and concomitant issue is about the investment loans. 1/3 is generally going, I told you, for the investment loans, long-term credit. We have not had concessional rates of interest on long-term loans. There has been a consistent demand by the Minister of Agriculture that we should have concessional rates of interest on term loans, just as it has been available for the short-term loans. The progressive measure of the Government of India, we see this year in 2020, in last year, in May 2020, when Government of India announced the Atmanirbhar package and Atmanirbhar package for agriculture, where 1% of concessional loan was given for the agri-infrastructure fund. Rupees 100,000 crore of agri-infrastructure fund created is available today at 1% of concessional rate. And that is the first major breakthrough, I would say, that we are now trying to pump in more investment loan through long-term loans. But there are certain issues around this in terms of institutional loan that comes for long-term loan. As you know, that a few years back, we removed the distinction between direct loan and indirect loan. Direct loan is the loan that goes into the farmer's hand directly onto the farms, whereas indirect loan is something that goes into infrastructure building, backward linkages, forward linkages. What we have noticed is that in the name of farmers, most of the long-term loan has actually gone into the corporate sector. When I say corporate sector, not just big people, but all kinds of people. And that is visible if you look at three factors. One is the amount of loan that goes is very high between the months of January and March. January to March is not the period of agriculture season. It's not a crop season. Crops are already standing there. That means somebody else is taking in the name of farmers. Second, the number of accounts borrowing more than rupees 10 crore is abnormally high. No farmer, however big he is, can afford to take rupees 10 crore loan. Third is that the loans that are going towards the indirect systems like tractor machineries or agriculture machineries or seed processing units is very high. Now these are not out of agriculture system. They are necessary for agriculture. But the short point is that we can provide separate loans to them and ensure that the long-term investment loan actually goes into the farms, that is the dairy sector, horticulture sector, fishery sector, farm sector, where we need development of irrigation, development of lands, building of infrastructure, that is a controlled agriculture systems like polyhouses, etc., dairy sectors. So what we should be looking at really is how do we ensure that at least 13.5% of the long-term loan, where the RBI has said should be going directly into the farm sector. See, that is another thing we have to ensure the delivery. I think I've taken a lot of time, so I will try to close it now. I would like to talk to you a little more about the long-term loans that the Doubling Farmers Income Committee looked at very closely between the growth rate in farm incomes and the extent of investment required, or gross capital formation, as they say. There is no gainsaying that there is a direct link between gross capital formation in agriculture and the growth rates. Over the five-year plan since 1980s, the what is called incremental capital output ratio, ICOR, has been somewhere around 2.5 to 6%. In the 10th five-year plan, in order to achieve a higher growth in agriculture, they set a higher target of ICOR. And then in the latest five-year plan, 2012-17, and the last five-year plan, in order to achieve a growth rate of 4% in agriculture, an ICOR of 20% was set, and a very high incremental capital output ratio. Now imagine, if we wanted higher ICOR to achieve just 4% growth rate in agriculture, it also meant that the productivities were decreasing. Productivity of crops, or productivity in terms of water use efficiency, land use efficiency were decreasing. We are aware that the incremental growth of productivity, whether it is cereals or pulses, which had been clocking very high before, started plateauing, particularly in the Indo-Gangetic plains, Punjab, Haryana, West Uttar Pradesh, mostly on account of soil degradation, depleting water table. So the issue is that as we increase our investment, we should also be looking at improving the technology that is adopted with the farmers. So that means a closer relation between the National Agriculture Research System in offering an appropriate technology and the farmers absorbing that proper technology is also equally important, not just credits. That means we look at ecosystem. I was very happy to see the word ecosystem in the note that you sent me, where you have very clearly said that we should look at ecosystem, because we tend to look at every single factor in a compartmental manner and don't realize that each of these growth factors have a supplementary and complementary relationship. So investments alone do not matter. Investments along with the appropriate technology matters. So in this context, I would like to say that the DFI committee, which analyzed the incremental capital output ratio for the period 2016-17 to 2022, which is the target phase for doubling farmers' income, has suggested that we should be aiming at a minimum of 9.5% growth rate, 12.5% growth rate in private capital investments and 16.5% growth in public sector investments. So both public sector and private sector investments must grow. Only then can we have proper gross capital formation in agriculture. Now, before I analyze a bit about this and close my talk, let me tell you about the trends about what has happened to this since 1990. 1991 is a watershed year for India, where the liberalization of the economy began, and we have seen robust growth rates of economy thereafter. Now, between 1991 and 2000, unfortunately, the public sector investment started declining in agriculture. Between 2001 to 2003-4, we see a fluctuating trend. That means rising and falling, no steadiness. Since 2004-5, when Government of India aimed at doubling the investments volume of credit in agriculture, we started seeing a steady growth. So public sector investment, which saw a decline for 15 years since 1990, started seeing a rise since 2004-5, and that has been the trend. Notwithstanding this, what we see is that within the private sector investment, the private sector investments are happening mostly on account of the individual farmers' accounts. They are not happening on account of the corporate world. Almost 98% of the private sector investment that happens, it happens because of the farmers. That means they borrow from institutions or money lenders or elsewhere or their own savings and put in. Whereas corporate sector has not made good investment. This is once again not to blame the corporate sector. It's only because we are not provided a policy environment which is feasible for the corporate sector to make investments. So the recent reforms over the last 6 years are meant to trigger investments by the private sector, private corporate sector, private non-farm sector. So that is very, very critical that we should appreciate. So now, when we make investments, the public sector investment generally happens in 3 segments. It happens for roads, electricity, and water. We build irrigation infrastructure, we build roads, we provide electricity, and of course today we provide also digital infrastructure. So this is called investment for agriculture. That means it provides an environment which supports agriculture growth. You have a good road to the village, the farmers are able to access inputs more easily and also exit their output more easily in a more efficient manner. If there's electricity, they're able to access power and draw water, for example, or take up processing, for example. So that is what governments do. But private investment, that is in agriculture, land development, water development, buying inputs, processing, etc., that has to happen to the private sector. And that is both farmers themselves have to invest and also the corporate sectors have to invest. And today's policy framework, I'll end up with that. Today's policy framework that aims at liberalizing the agriculture sector is to not only trigger the animal spirits that exist in every person to tap the potential that exists in agriculture, but also simultaneously enable to develop backward and forward linkages so essential for supporting the agricultural growth. So today when Government of India says that I allow 100% FDI into the agriculture sector, and when I allow the new Trade Act for direct trade between the farmers and the purchasers anywhere in the country, or liberalization and removing the caps on storage and stocks and transportation through amending the Essential Commodities Act, or enabling contract farming between the farmers and the sponsor company through a legalized process, what we are really aiming at is provide an opportunity for the corporate sector to make intelligent investments that will actually trigger the growth. Today, the growth trigger for agriculture will have to happen not just on the farm, but outside the farm. On the farm, I meant new technology for higher productivity, for example. But today, the incentive has to come from markets, where farmers are able to monetize what they grow in an efficient manner and fetch better prices, remunerative prices. All of that will happen provided we build agri-logistics. We are able to reach out to high-end and far-range markets. We are able to reach out global markets. We are able to reach out in such a way that the quality is not compromised. And we are able to reach out in such a way that there is disintermediation. That means without many intermediaries, the farmers are able to directly trade with the markets. So that's the purpose of the new the reforms. And I would also like to suggest that the egalitarianism will come provided we capacitate the farmers. That means somebody says, to actually go back to Adam Smith, after all, talking of free market, we should be talking of free and fair markets. In a free and fair market, the opportunities will be available to every stakeholder, provided everybody is equally capacitated in terms of knowledge, information, withholding capacity. Today, farmers do not have withholding capacity, and therefore they enter into distress sale. We therefore need institutions to provide them loans easily against the commodities after the harvesting. So negotiable warehouse receipt system has to be appropriate, strong. So the investment loan by the institutions today, not just crop loans for production, it has to be post-production loans. That's most important. So I would suggest that institutions and all other kinds of product designing, deliveries must be today around post-harvest management. That is, I think, much more important than earlier times. So let me end up by saying that we now need to look at agriculture growth through a new prism. The importance of adding institutional credit is only growing. And we together have to capacitate the farmers and also enable them to generate profits and make savings. Savings rate in India is pretty good. That is because of the general culture of our country, where if you compare, say, with the Western world, where the purchasing power is high, but the saving rates are much lower than in India. So how do we ensure that this particular saving habit of our people is nurtured? Yes, I know the modern economy talks for consumption expenditure, but consumption along with savings will help in triggering the economy and simultaneously triggering the investments. If we want investments to happen in agriculture, which alone is the growth trigger, we should be promoting savings. So the bankers will also have to look at whether they can provide some kind of an incentive for the farmers to save these things. So lastly, I think I have spoken quite a bit, and of course there's no end to this. Let me end up saying that we, in order to create an environment where the farmers can borrow properly, we should be liberalizing this credit rating system. The non-performing asset system cannot be the same for the farmers as it is for the other borrowers. The second one is, today the extent of lease is increasing in our country. What was around 4% 20 years back, today at least 10% of the farming is based on lease. Unfortunately, the lessees do not have access to institutional credit. So Government of India has suggested, Niti Aayog has suggested, what is called adopt a land lease system where lease becomes legalized, and therefore bankers can recognize appropriately the lessees and offer them loans. Andhra Pradesh tried out a very novel experiment where they built what is called recognizing the lease, and the bankers recognize a certificate issued by the revenue authorities. So can we have that kind of legalized lease system, adopting different models? But it is very important that we recognize lease in this country. Today, a lot of people migrate for education, for jobs to urban centers, and there's nobody to cultivate their land, and they are leasing them. Since we don't have a legalized system, thanks to the restrictive state revenue systems, we are not able to transfer loans to the farmers. So that's another thing. And one more way is to recognize producers' organizations. That means not just individuals, but also the farmer producers' organizations are recognized as due loanees. So this is the only way that we can actually drive more loans into the agriculture system, into a diversified agriculture system, and then we can ensure that the growth of agriculture happens. So friends, I think the future belongs to the post-production managers. It belongs to those who deal with processing, those who deal with marketing, those who deal with aggregation, those who deal with finances, those who deal with new kind of knowledge that deals with post-production management. So hence, let us look at it differently. And I always hold that financial institutions, whether within the government sector or non-government sector, have a very, very important role to play presently and in the future if we need to sustain agriculture. And agriculture, the last point, let me tell you, is an evergreen subject. Agriculture is an evergreen domain. I would not agree that the importance of agriculture will decline as the economy matures. In a country like India with huge population, and in the 21st century, where non-renewable forms of fossil resources are depleting, we all have to go back to bioeconomy. Bioeconomy based on resources generated on the farms and in the forests and other common property resources. Hence, the institutional credit must also look at how to promote bioresources. That means the agriculture resources that will feed the biofuel system, biomaterial system, bioenzyme system, and bioeconomy in general. So there's a new opportunity opening up in the 21st century. And India can take a lead, and we all shall aim at ensuring that the purchasing power of the farming community, which is almost 12 crore or 120 million farm households in this country, plus another 140 million landless agriculture labor who depend indirectly on agriculture. Their economy is dependent on this thing. So we must raise our share of agriculture in the nation's GVA to 20% from the current 15%. That's the target for 21st century, and that's the way forward. So let's all try to tap this huge opportunity that exists for all of us. Thank you very much. And sorry I took your extra time, but I thought that I should try and set this context for experts to then take forward the specific subjects forward. Thank you very much, and good day.
Thank you, Dr. Dalwai. It had been a fascinating exposition of the broad range of issues in agriculture that relate to agricultural finance, and quite a number of them you dealt with in very great detail as well. All the work that you had done over the last 40 years in several spheres around agriculture, they are fully reflected, and also the way forward, the kind of directions you have given on some of those, they are absolutely very good. You made my job both easy and difficult for the future. Easy in the sense, you having covered so much, I need not really belabor some of those. Difficult in the sense, what is it that I say in addition? Yeah, and thank you so much for being there. I hope you will be there for some more time being part of this. Kirti, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan.
Before I go, I listened to your presentation before I go. Thank you. I would have sat through, but I have got another meeting in the afternoon, therefore, so I will listen to you and then go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, and thank you, Dr. Dalwai, for setting the tone of the agri-financing track. I will now request Mr. Srinivasan to present the highlights from State of Agri-Financing Report. Over to you, Mr. Srinivasan.
It's not visible. What happened? Yeah. Let me see where it is. Yeah. Is it visible now? Okay. Yeah, the technology is a challenge mostly. I think after Dr. Dalwai's exposition, where he covered almost all the aspects relating to the real sector, that's agriculture, and how it relates to agricultural finance and where we are. I don't think I should spend too much time on what I am going to say. Basically, this presentation is based on a publication that was to have been released today, but then Corona has had many victims. So this book is getting delayed because of that. We hope to be releasing it at a future date. But then most of the work relating to finalizing the book, they are through. So I'm sharing some, snippets. They are not something very, new, or they are not going to be very surprising. It's based on existing facts and data, and also trying to look at where we are going towards and where we should be going. So that's what would be the way this presentation would be. I speak, I will share a few pieces of data, and also later on a few other observations on the current critical issues and some of the recommendations. Yeah, this is something that Dr. Dalwai already talked about, the kind of credit flow that is taking place. We seem to have a good amount of credit flow taking place year after year. The targets are being set by government and RBI, and they are being exceeded, though there are marginal shortfalls in achieving priority sector lending targets for agriculture by some banks. But then when we try and contextualize the credit flow against agricultural GDP, we were steadily growing, say, from about 2004-05 onwards. And you could see in the graph that till about 2015-16, the growth had been quite reasonable. Each year we were trying to finance more of our agricultural operations. So credit as a proportion of value added, it was increasing. But if we look at the situation between 15-16 till last year, either it is stagnating or it is declining, which means the agriculture does not seem to be a sector of choice when it comes to credit allocation. And maybe banks, financial institutions find agriculture less attractive. Otherwise, there is no reason why this should decline. To look at what this means, say there are countries like Vietnam, which have a much higher credit to GDP ratio. They are higher than 75%, which means the extent of support required in order to push up growth in terms of credit, if it is not high enough, then we are having certain other issues. We will get into some of the details later, like Dr. Dalwai also talked about. When you look at the capital formation in agriculture, we can see that again after about 2011-12, we do not have a very robust capital formation, data, though there are some increases. Mostly this has stagnated well below the levels of 2011-12 or 2013-14. You see, the private sector share of capital formation continues to be high in agriculture. You look at typically this is around 78% has to come from households. Later on, we will also look at some of the implications of this. Whereas in industry, the private corporations bring a larger share. Private households do not bring in so much. But during the owing to the structure of agriculture, which is spread over millions of small farms in different places, investment requirements and capital formation, they are typically met by households bringing in money. So investment credit in agriculture, unless it ramps up, we are going to have issues in increasing the capital formation here. Like Dr. Dalwai already talked about, the incremental capital, especially investment capital, will determine what is the quality of growth and the incremental output. So the ICOR ratios have been rising quite consistently for a long time. In between, there was a certain period of time in which it was slightly lower. But even now, the ICOR is tending to increase because we need to invest more in a commercializing agriculture, and it is becoming more investment intensive. But here also, another issue is the capital formation that is actually taking place does not conform to the sectoral share. The crop sector is seeing a declining share in the gross value added. You could see 65% it was in 2011-12. It has come down to 56% in 2018-19. But if we look at the share of gross capital formation, it has not fallen that drastically. A 9% fall in GVA, it's only a 5% fall in capital formation, which means people continue to invest in the crop sector. But you look at livestock, there has been an increase of around 7% in its share of GVA, whereas capital formation has increased only by about 2%, which means the productivity, profitability, efficiency in livestock will be comparatively muted because it's not adding to the productivity enhancing kind of infrastructure and equipment. So this is something that we will have to look at how to remedy this. As I said earlier, though the long-term loans from banks are increasing, which we will see slightly later, the loans for investment purpose, they are not increasing, they are actually declining. You could see here from the graph, which is given by the RBI's internal working group, which reviewed agricultural finance last year. They have said that it is not the divergence between the short-term loans, which are keeping on increasing continuously, and the decline in investment credit. This is something that we will have to look at. And this also is something that relates to the capital formation discussion we had slightly earlier. We need private sector to bring in large parts of capital formation. They cannot bring it in unless there is a bank credit support for investment credit for that. The capital stock will then not be added with adverse consequences that can flow. Loans to small farmers, we know that they are continuing to operate about 47% or so of the total area. But then in terms of credit share, they get about 9%. the point that Dr. Dalwai made again, the large loans going to certain sectors which may not be actually farmers are also part of the overall credit flow. So here, the encouraging news is the small farmer credit flow has been increasing. It has not stagnated in between for a period of about 10 years in 90s. It did not really increase fast enough. It is increasing, but how to accelerate this flow is a question that we have to address. Even this RBI internal working group had a few suggestions on that. The agricultural credit flow, the other point I would like to underline is non-banking finance companies, microfinance institutions, they also provide loans for agriculture. Now they have registered their presence. Almost around, you could say 9% of loans have been provided by these sets of institutions, whereas we focus all our schemes and programs exclusively on banks, and that too on scheduled commercial bank, to a lesser extent on the cooperative banks. There are things that, follow from there, because cooperative banks are more tuned to financing small and marginal farmers than the commercial banks. So, and also in terms of how it is delivered, about 64% of credit, it is done through Kisan credit cards. But then if you look at the country, the population of farmers as per the census, and the percentage of farmers that cards that have been issued, it's about 45% farmers are covered by KCC. But this is not the entire truth, because there are farmers who have multiple Kisan credit cards issued by different banks. And sometimes in the same household, you might find 3 or 4 Kisan credit cards also in some of the agriculturally advanced states, which means the KCC coverage is not at a level where we could say, yeah, we are going to be sorting out problems of at least crop loans. There is a move now. The government has announced recently that they would like to cover 100% of farmers with Kisan credit cards. But the active number of Kisan credit cards, even again the issued ones, that has been declining over the last 4 years, which is not a welcome development. This requires some more investigation. The NPA levels from the supply side is a matter of concern. You could see that from 4.6% in 2015, plus NPAs, they have climbed up to 10.1% in 2020. This is just before the pandemic struck. And we know that a large number of farm loans, they are under moratorium and coming out of that. So March 21 is a time to look at and watch as to what's going to happen. The long-term loans, as I said, have been increasing in agriculture. They were 22% of total loan flow in 2012-13. They've increased to 40%. But then all long-term loans are not for investment, because sometimes even the KCC limit itself is a longer-term one, being given for 3 years at a time. So we'll have to look at how to make the long-term loans actually go for investments. The interest subvention and waiver, they have been there for quite some time. I just tried to make an analysis of what exactly is the meaning of significance of interest subvention to our farming community. As a percentage of credit, say in 2019-20, it was about say 1.2%. But as a percentage of the agricultural output, it was hardly about 0.5%. So all the support that we give is helping the farmer to an extent of 0.5% of what he brings out. Is that a kind of a scheme that requires much more oxygen? Yeah, there are lots of people who are happy when the cost of credit comes down. But then it turns the focus of public, policy intervention on purely the production side, that to a small extent, to about say 52% farmers who actually manage to borrow from a bank. We know from NABARD's financial inclusion survey that was done about 4 years back, that 40% farmers rely on informal, sources. They do not access bank loans. These 40% farmers, they are not going to get even this 0.5%, support. So we also need to look at the implications of a subsidized agricultural loan on banks' enthusiasm to provide other loans for agriculture. And the farmer's expectation is, if I can get a subvented loan, why not try and get that for everything that I want, whether it is consumption, whether it is buying a tractor, though the crop loan, which is subsidized, it's a year-long loan at maximum, or it's a crop season long. And to apply it for a long duration purpose, you get into liquidity issues at the farmer level. You also possibly get into some kinds of default that might happen. So the bankers' sense, a lot of them I talked to, is that KCC might probably be hiding quite a lot of issues because it may be getting evergreen now. So we need to look at how we unbundle the interest subsidy scheme, focus it more sharply, try and reduce the misutilization that might possibly be happening. I also looked at, for specific crops, what kind of impact of the interest subvention. It's given there. So it could be anything from 1.4% for tur dal growers in Maharashtra to say 2.3% for jowar cultivators in Andhra Pradesh. So crop specific variations of what is the interest impact, but that is a function of scale of finance more than anything else. Yeah, waivers and subventions. When we compute the numbers, about 1.4 lakh crores have been waived so far in terms of agricultural loans by different states and also by the center, which came in with a massive scheme in 2008. The interest subvention during this period was around almost 1 lakh crore. Overall, when we put all these numbers together and then try and measure it as a proportion of agricultural credit flow, it works to more than 4%. The number could be a few basis points here or there, but overall, if 4% of agricultural credit flow is what we have managed to, redress through these means, we will have to seriously look at, is there any other thing to require to be done rather than announcing this kind of periodic waivers? Because farmers' liquidity and income problems, they have not been cured by any of these. It looks like we try and pump the water out from a flooded place and more water comes into the same place. We are not stopping the water coming in. We are only trying to pump the stagnant water from there. So the problems continue to remain. The waivers also have an impact on credit culture. They have weakened states' finances. There is a very informed article written by a couple of people from Reserve Bank research wing, and also agricultural finance. The banks worry really about whether it should be my preferred choice because this can get impacted by periodic intervention. So can we find a non-political, workable financial solution that focuses on outputs and markets, not so much on the input side and the loans? What kind of critical issues are there? Yes, credit to GDP ratio. We already talked about that. Coverage of farmers and adequacy of credit. Real sector policy, despite all the work that has been done by several committees, including Dr. Dalwai's committee on doubling income, there are a number of recommendations that have still not been brought to the table. They are still not addressing profitability issues. The important parts like, say, how do we get away from MSP and procurement for certain crops in certain regions and focus on profitability issues of several other farms, how they can make markets work in a fair and transparent manner and also in a viable manner for them. If agriculture is profitable and the risks are managed better, yes, bank credit will certainly flow, but are we there? A crop insurance scheme, after showing quite a bit of dynamism over about 2-3 years after it was revamped fully, it now seems to stagnate. Not many people are too happy with that, it looks like. Value chain financing, the terminology is bandied about quite a bit more than in the past, but still concrete action on the ground by banks, we don't see much. Mid-market institutions in agricultural enterprises, business space, they are required. They can make the market, they can bring technology, they can make access to finance for farmer groups much easier. So private sector solutions in marketing and linkages, they are required. So how do we bring up these mid-market institutions? Space for startups, it has expanded considerably, but they require much more financial support. I do not mean only credit. Even equity, even mezzanine funding, apart from credit, will be required by them. The RBI working group set up last year, they did talk about quite a number of issues in relation to how we make agricultural finance perform better, digitize land records, review priority sector guidelines, and see how allocation of RADF corpus can play a role in smoothening the skew in the flow of credit across regions and states. Separate the targets for investment capital and working capital in priority sector. This was a very valid observation that they made. Expansion of the KCC coverage, but they said we should strengthen the scale of finance determination, which again Dr. Dalwai referred to, much more efficient in those states where it is still not so. Then the interest subvention, how to curb misuse of subvented loans and how to actually make them focus on the purpose why they are being given. They also talked about setting up a guarantee fund for improving flow of agricultural finance and especially a framework for financing and supporting FPO, which includes a guarantee fund mechanism. They actually wanted that this database on agricultural MIS should be strengthened so that it provides a reliable base for monitoring. And yeah, avoid waivers, which have all-round negative impact is one of the suggestions. And finally, to conclude, yes, need for new products, new process in agricultural finance, looking to the KCC becoming slightly more fatigued as a product we have to look at. Then post-harvest, we have to really focus. Almost everyone in the agricultural field talks about this, aggregation, processing, marketing. We require to attend to this on a mission mode, how to ramp up these activities for the benefit of the farmer with good quality financial support. New institution, I talked about that. Yeah, technology adoption in agricultural finance. We have seen in the last 2-3 years, quite a number of startups and also mainstream institutions taking up, but this needs to be ramped up big time. And then this should be attached to the kind of digitized land records and also credit registries, collateral registries, so that financing takes place much easier, like in the case of microfinance that happens today. Accelerated policy reforms that will induce investments in agriculture, they are needed so that we give a market orientation to what agriculture is do. Yeah, I do not go to belabor the other things except that NBFCs and MFIs, their role in agricultural credit, we should really recognize, because the very small ticket, ground level credit, probably they are better positioned to do. So can they be incentivized? The incentivization is not in terms of giving them any money or grant support. It's about, can they become part of the priority sector lending certificate participation, which has its own what you call built-in incentives for participants who can create these kind of ground level assets. So with this, I think I will conclude the presentation, and we look forward to a very engaging discussion in the panel of experts that is to follow. Yeah, Kirti, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan, for such an insightful presentation and to keep it succinct. I now invite Mr. Nitin Singh, Financial Service Specialist from Assam Rural Infrastructure and Agriculture Society, for announcing the launch of Agri-Finance Challenge Fund. Over to you, Mr. Singh.
Thank you so much, Kirti, for this opportunity. Well, we have been hearing from the panel about the scenario within India, and we here in Northeast, especially in Assam, have designed an innovative program. This program is a part of a World Bank project known as APART, Assam Agri